This is election 2018, the race for New Mexico Public Lands Commissioner. I'm Fred Martino. In partnership with the League of Women Voters of Greater Las Cruces, we invited the candidates to join us for this forum. They will have 60 seconds to respond to each question and should not mention their opponent in the answer. The candidates include Democrat Stephanie Garcia Richard and Republican Patrick Lyons. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
And we also want to thank Kim Sorensen. She is the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Las Cruces and has our first question.
Thank you, Fred. Stephanie, what are your qualifications to be Commissioner of Public Lands?
Thank you for the question, Kim. So, you know, the constitutional mandate on this office is pretty special. It's to raise revenue on behalf of our public schools, universities, and hospitals, such as the university we're very privileged to be at this evening. And being an educator myself for 19 years, I feel that I have the exact lens through which to understand the impact of every single dollar raised into the state land office for the beneficiaries. In addition, I've had the privilege of representing a northern district in the Jemez Mountains for 6 years in the New Mexico State Legislature. In that time, I have brought together cattle growers, the extractive industry. I've worked on water issues, Endangered Species Act issues, public land access issues, and I've gained a reputation in the legislature for working on these issues, but really bringing disparate groups together to hammer out compromise, to reach across the aisle, to figure out solutions. And so that is my experience for this office. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
Thank you. Yes, it's great to be back here on campus. I'm a graduate of New Mexico State University here, and so is my wife and my kids, and it's good to be back here. I've been managing lands all my life. What we do there is we manage state trust lands, 9 million acres of surface, 13 million acres of subsurface for our beneficiaries. Our job is to raise revenue for education. We don't determine how it's spent. I served 10 years in the state Senate and 8 years as your Commissioner of Public Lands before, and currently serving as your Public Regulation Commissioner, not from this district. So in our first 8 years, we raised $4 billion for education, more than for our beneficiaries, more than any one other commissioner, and millions of dollars of that went to New Mexico State University. So what we want here is someone who has the education experience to do it. I have a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Economics from New Mexico State. I have a Master of Agriculture from Colorado State. So we've been managing lands all our life. All we do is give it to the legislature, the money, or to our beneficiaries, which is one of them is New Mexico State, and they determine how it's spent. So we want to be land managers. Thank you.
Okay, Patrick, the next question, we begin with you. Under what main circumstances would you sell state trust land?
Main circumstance to sell state trust land mainly is to make sure it benefits the beneficiary. Selling land, we didn't do much selling at all before. I don't think we did any. We did exchanges because I had someone say you'll leave the land office, you'll sell a lot of land when you get there. We left with the 78,000 more acres of state trust land when I was there 8 years than less. So that's what we do. We try to do land exchanges. One of them was a very important one here for Doñana County. Union Pacific Rail Yard wanted to expand in El Paso. They had the border on one side and I-10 on the other, so we did a series of land exchanges that brought Union Pacific Rail Yard to Doñana County, Santa Teresa area, and that brought in 600 permanent jobs, 2,000 construction jobs, and $2 billion investment. So that's the circumstances that you do it. Otherwise, you would do a trade to build schools on, which we did several of those, and maybe some for developments which you can't be able to sell the land to get that big investment there because private companies don't want to do that. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Thank you. So, you know, with the current climate in the federal government of selling off land to the highest bidder for development in, you know, developing oil and gas industry, for example, we don't want to be selling off our lands to the highest bidder in New Mexico. In New Mexico, what we want to be doing are land swaps that actually benefit both parties with an eye towards our beneficiaries. We want to make sure that whatever swaps we do benefit the folks who are making profit off of the fund, our public school kids. And so I would like to point your attention, your viewers' attention, to some former land swaps that have been done that cost Las Cruces hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair, swaps that were done with a developer here, Philippou, in the past. Those were not done with an eye towards benefiting our beneficiaries. Those were done at the cost of our beneficiaries. So whoever we elect to this office, we want to make sure they do land swaps in the interest of our beneficiaries.
Thank you. Stephanie, what is the proper balance between environmental concerns and revenue production in state trust lands?
So this is a great question. This is really at the crux of this office. So the constitutional mandate says raise revenue in the best interest of the beneficiaries. And for me, the best interest of the beneficiaries is long-term sustainable land use, land management of our land, so that it's not only here for the beneficiaries we have today, our public school children of today, but for generations into the future. So truly what that means to me is to incentivize and encourage conservation practices, especially around water, to ensure that we are protecting our very vulnerable state trust land areas that should not be up for any further development. Chaco Canyon comes to mind. That's a cultural site that's special for, northern New Mexico Native Americans. We need to be protecting, conserving, at the same time understanding that the job of the land commissioner is to raise revenue. So how are we going to do that responsibly? Renewable energy is one way that we can renewably, sustainably raise revenue for our beneficiaries.
Thank you. Patrick?
Repeat your question, please.
Sure. What is the proper balance between environmental concerns and revenue production on state trust lands?
Our job is to raise revenue for education in a sustainable way. If you take care of the lands, it'll take care of you. That's what ranchers do. That's why we're the true environmentalists. We take care of those lands. We want to do that. And I think the companies that we deal with do the same way. They don't want to do it environmentally. They want to do it in an environmentally sensitive way and take care of the land. That's what we do. We have an audit team that makes sure that's done proper. We have an environmental team that makes sure it's done proper, and you have to have the right mixture of people there at the land office to get that done. And we will do that with the oil and gas industry and with the renewable energies. We promoted renewable energy. We were signed the first wind lease at the land office. We've been involved in about every wind and solar lease there is there, and we will continue that. Also, we'll do it with commercial development lease. We didn't do any trades on commercial lands. We got commercial lands to developers. We didn't sell any commercial lands. We were there before, and that's her answer was part of going after me last time, and you prohibited that.
Patrick, what are your ideas for revenue enhancement using state trust land?
Revenue enhancement. Right now, the land office, as we told you before, we raised $4 billion for education, and we will do that again. We expect to raise a lot more of that, hopefully twice as much when we get there. And the revenue enhancement, one thing you got to remember, 94% of the revenue came from oil and gas leases at the land office, 94%. So that's a big issue. We need to diversify more. But right now there's an explosion in two counties, Lee and Eddy County, for oil and gas development. And to enhance that, we want to do renewable energy. We've already estimated how much more we could bring in, about 25 million a year. But you have to have a market for that, and you have to work with several other states to do that, several independent private developers. We also would like to increase tourism down there. We have some great lands where we can do more ecotourism. I want to try to do more of that. And also want to do some commercial development where the lands, state trust lands, are next to urban areas, urbanize it. But we want to work with the local communities to do that because they, in partnership with them.
Stephanie?
Thank you for the question. So absolutely in partnership with all of our local communities. So for example, here in Doña Ana, you have the beautiful Organ Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument. Why are we not taking advantage of our opportunities in ecotourism? So there's a proposal to create the Office of Outdoor Recreation that could really draw revenue into our state coffers in a very sustainable, conservationist-minded way. When I campaign out on the campaign trail, I talk about maximizing and diversifying revenue into the fund. What do I mean by that? Maximizing revenue means holding our users of our public land accountable, making sure they're paying their fair share of royalties to our state, of all of the benefits and profits that our state should be getting for use of our state land. Diversifying means that we need to look to other ways to raise revenue for our state trust land. I have proposed really providing bold leadership on building up of renewable energy on state trust lands and ecotourism.
Thank you. Okay, Stephanie, how would you approach solving the water disputes with Texas?
Absolutely. So this starts with something that actually the current office holder has already begun to pursue. Did you know that folks are drilling water on the Texas side of the border and then selling it back to New Mexico? So not only are we responsible for hundreds of thousands of acre feet that we owe to the Texas side of the border, but now they're drilling that very water that impacts our aquifers and selling it back to producers in the southern part of the state, using it for oil and gas development. I would put a stop to that. I would also really encourage use of what's called recycled water in fracking processes. I would also incentivize and encourage use of conservation of water in some of our agricultural practices.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, I believe it involves more than just Texas. It also involves Mexico. There's an international agreement with Mexico on the Rio Grande, so we have to protect our water from both of those. There's many people in Juarez, there is in the entire state of New Mexico. So the Office of State Engineer is very important. You have to work with them to do this, because we just can't do it at the Commissioner of Public Lands. It has to be worked with other agencies to do this. And that's what we're good at. We've been working with other agencies for years and years, and we'll continue to do that. Work on cooperation with them, make sure our legal battles are fought, because that's what it's going to boil down to, fighting for your water rights there. And we will continue to do that. It's not only here in the Rio Grande, it's also on the eastern side of the state, southeastern part of the state, and also more river water runs through San Juan County anywhere. So we also, as a statewide office, you have to fight for the water up in the San Juan County on San Juan and Animas River. So it's all around the state. We know what to do there because we've been there, and we will continue to work with the agencies.
Patrick, what is the Commission's responsibility for conservation activities on state trust lands?
The Commissioner has a lot of responsibilities for conservation activities on there, and that's what we proved before. One thing, when we took office before there, we saw a lot of trash on state trust lands due to regional landfills. No little town had small landfills anymore. So we started a program of Don't Trash the Trust. And what we did there is we went out there and we cleaned up a lot of trust lands. We prosecuted people. We could find names in trash bags there, and we'll continue to do that because that's so important not to trash the trust. Also, we do a habitat cleanup out there. We also make sure we have a healthy forest out there. We did several healthy forest programs. One of them was the Moon Mountain project up at Rio Doso. So it's very important. And also environmentally clean, sensitive areas such as oil and gas areas, we have to be able to monitor that, work with the environmental department to make sure we get that done in an efficient way, and we will continue to do that. I think yet another example of working with other agencies to make sure we have the ability to do that.
Okay, Stephanie.
Thank you. So truly, this portion of the mandate on the office has not been looked at in its entirety, I believe. Conserving public trust land for future generations is one of the key responsibilities constitutionally provided to this office. And so I would say a number of things. So the state legislature actually passed a bill that gives money for restoration and remediation practices. The current land commissioner has put that into place. I would intend to beef that up, make sure that there's plenty of money for remediation and restoration projects on state trust land. I would protect and conserve any acreage that is vulnerable, that is damaged, that needs to really be, have its ecosystem protected. In addition, there are many partnerships that can be done throughout the state. For example, here at New Mexico State University, you have the Jornada Rangeland Institute, which does lots of remediation and restoration partnerships with the State Land Office.
Thank you. And Stephanie, how would you regulate grazing on state trust lands, and what should be your relationship with ranchers?
So I actually come from a family of ranchers in the same part of the state that my opponent comes from, the eastern side of the state, and so I married into a ranching family. I know the lifestyle very well. I actually represent ranchers in my legislative district and have dealt with them on a number of issues that they face. I believe that they should be encouraged and incentivized to use sustainable practices, which has already been mentioned, they actually already use. Ranchers are conservationists at heart. They know about the long-term health of the land. They know that they need to, practice conservation efforts that will provide for the long-term sustainability of the land. So I think that those things should be incentivized and really encouraged in the leases with the ranchers. That is a way of life that we've had in New Mexico now for generations, and it needs to be supported.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
Being a rancher all my life, farmer rancher, we know what it takes to take care of the lands. And the ranchers, the agricultural lessees would be a better way to put it, are very important to the land office. With only 165 employees, we don't possibly look at all 9 million acres. But when you do a lease with the rancher, agricultural lease on those lands, they're responsible for making sure that land is taken care of. And if there's a problem, then we get notified. So they're really our eyes and ears that watch it and make sure it's not getting trashed like we talked about earlier. It's very important to do that. As for compensation, there's a grazing formula in place now that come out of a lawsuit with Commissioner Baca about 30 years ago. And we stick to that grazing formula, how much we charge there. However, in drought times before when I was there, the grazing formula lags behind about a year, so we decreased the amount of what was charged there to protect our lands from being overgrazed. That's very important. We ran a memorial in the House and Senate and let everybody know what we're doing, and it was very well taken, and that's what I think is work with the ranchers and farmers to make sure our lands are taken care of.
Thank you.
Patrick, should there be more, fewer, or the same number of leases for oil and gas development on state trust lands? Explain.
Well, I don't know if you can put a number more, less, or the same at all. You have to roll with the market right there. Oil and gas production is up like 700% since I've been there in 2003. That's a tremendous amount. That's why we need someone there that knows how to work with the oil and gas companies, make sure they pay their fair share, and make sure they do it in a clean environmental way. So the number of leases really isn't a set number. They nominate a lot of lands, and we look at where we want to nominate that land or not in a lease sale, then we determine from there. I think right now there's a boom going on in the oil and gas industry. We have a $2 billion surplus due to the oil and gas industry. It's going to be about 50% of the budget coming up. So yes, you have to work with them very well. And leases are up right now. I don't know if they're going to maintain that, but we have to rely on the private sector because everything we do, all the revenue we generate is from the private sector. It's not from another government agency.
Okay, Stephanie.
So you could make the argument that we need someone who can work with the oil and gas industry, or you could make the argument we need someone who's going to hold the oil and gas industry to task. For example, while folks are making hand over fist on our state trust land, why are they not paying the same royalty rate that the Texas producers are paying? Why did no one hold them to task? Why do we have some oil and gas producers paying zero royalty? We need a land commissioner who truly will maximize each and every dollar that we get off of drilling of our public lands. Because no matter what you think about the oil and gas industry, no matter what you think about fossil fuels, they are actually not with us here forever. So while they are, we need to make sure we get every single dollar out of them that we can while they're using our lands. As an educator, I know what those dollars mean to a classroom. I was in a classroom when the bottom went out of our economy. So we need someone in the land office on the side of our kids.
Thank you. Stephanie, how would you balance development of state trust lands for oil and gas with encouraging solar and wind development?
So I am under the impression that we have not had bold leadership on using our state trust land for renewable energy since Ray Powell. So Commissioner Powell had about $700 million of set projects in the pipeline to use for our areas of state trust lands that are ideal for renewable energy development. I believe that our land commissioner should lead the way in providing that bold leadership of using state trust land for renewable energy development, for tying into transmission lines. You all right now are having a discussion about the SunZia proposed route. The land commissioner should absolutely be involved in those discussions on behalf of the state, on behalf of our school children, our beneficiaries. I think that this is a missed opportunity in New Mexico. We are the second sunniest state in the nation. We are being outpaced by New Jersey in wind development. There's a lot of potential there.
Thank you. Patrick.
Well, oil and gas development and renewable energy development are two different things, but let's talk about renewable energy development. That's so important, and I think it really starts at the legislature. It's called the Renewable Portfolio Standards. They passed it 20% by 2020, and it's really what brought in a lot of renewable energy in the state now. When the legislature's looking to say 40% by 2040 or 2035, whatever they do, that's what's going to kick off renewable energy, I believe, for use in this state. Also, we want to produce as much renewable energy we can for export from this state. We want to make sure we get compensated properly for that amount of energy that's getting exported. And that's why we've been at the forefront of it. We signed the first wind lease at the land office. We worked on every solar and wind project in the state, being with the PRC or the land office since that time, and we will continue that. It's another example. You have to work with the private sector. Everything we do, these are developers of the private sector, so that's where it's so important to have someone to work with them.
Okay. Patrick, how important are the funds for restoring and remediating state trust lands? Is there enough of this funding, and if not, how would you go about obtaining more?
Those funds are very important. That's what we did our first time there. When we got into office, we had about $500,000 of restoration funds. You immediately, to get those more funds, you have to go to the legislature and ask them to put that in your budget. And you present the budget. There's a checks and balance there. You present your request to the legislature, how much money you need, and then they figure it out, and then they put it in House Bill 2 and they give it to you. So we immediately went there and asked for another $1 million. Then we did that every year. So that's how you request it, and that's why we want to do it. Restoration of state trust land is very important. You can look at the Mescalero Indian Reservation. They really do a good job at forest restoration out there and forest thinning. And we try to model that on Moon Mountain up there, and we'll continue to do that. We want to do that. So the way to get it is go to the legislature, ask for more money, and get them in there, and then get those projects going. We had a whole team built there before. We had 9 people there doing that, and we're going to do that again.
Stephanie?
So actually, the way that you used to ask for remediation funds for the State Land Office before House Bill 24 was to go to the legislature. But the legislature actually passed this bill that said you can use 1% off of something called the Land Maintenance Fund for remediation and restoration. Well, how do we get more money into the Land Maintenance Fund? All renewable sources of revenue into the State Land Office go into that fund. So if we are going to beef up commercial development of our state trust land, renewable development of our state trust land, all of those are renewable revenue that go into the Land Maintenance Fund, thereby increasing the amount we can use for restoration and remediation. I absolutely agree that that fund is crucial for maintaining, protecting our state trust land. New Mexicans have that as part of their value system. They value our land, they value our water, they want to see it protected.
Thank you. Stephanie, how would you handle the leasing of lands for agricultural use? Explain.
So the lands for agricultural use have been leased in this state for 100 years. Those of you who are in those industries know that you've had generations of people as part of those leases. I actually represented folks in my legislative district that had leases that were federal leases in the Santa Fe National Forest. Those leases had been passed down for generations. I believe that any land that is available for agricultural use should be leased for agricultural use. That is not a large portion of what we get into the State Land Office, but it is a culture that I believe the State Land Office should value and support.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yes, agricultural leasing is very important, as I stated before, because the ranchers, farmers kind of look at the land. Right now, it's established in statutory. You have a 5-year lease that you sign as a rancher, and then you make payments each year in August for that lease on there. And it's based on a grazing formula, or if it's cropland, it's based on the production of the crop there. So it's very important that we have the agricultural leases. When I was there before, there was some open acreage. That means there's not an agricultural lease on it. That's something I would look up in every county and have some of my staff say, hey, a rancher out there would want to lease this to bring more money for education. And we'd find people to do these open acreage leasing, which was very important. And I think that's another way to raise revenue. So we want to do the agricultural leasing. It's important, and you do it through the statutory 5-year lease.
Okay. Patrick, believe it or not, we're on our last question. What are some of your ideas for regulating the use of state trust lands for for recreation?
Well, right now there's a system established in the land office where you get a permit, a recreational permit, to go on state trust lands, and it's free. It doesn't cost you. You don't have to apply it. We know you're going on there, and the leasee is notified about it. So we want to expand that a little bit, open it up where it's possible. There's a lot of lands that we didn't get. A lot of the choice lands. A lot of them were patented, settled land, or there's national forest. So we have some good recreational land, but not the best in the state. We have to work with the program to try to do that with the recreational permits. We also have a lease with the Game and Fish Department to manage the game and fish that are on these state trust lands, because we don't have the biologists, wildlife biologists, or wildlife enforcement to do that. So it's very important to work with the Game and Fish on doing that too. So we will continue to do the recreational program, and hopefully we get some more valuable land to do that.
Okay, Stephanie.
Thank you. So you all know, and your viewers know, we are the land of enchantment. Why are we being outpaced in our ecotourism by Colorado, Utah, Arizona, who do not have near the sites that we have to offer here in New Mexico? So I already mentioned the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. Did you know that there's an area of the Boot Heel that actually is in fact state trust land where you can see more species of raptor at one time in the viewing season than you can anywhere else in the country? Why are we not promoting, supporting tourism to those choice places in our state that we know of their beauty? Now let's start to open them up responsibly, sustainably, so that we can start to provide revenue into the fund in a sustainable, responsible way. We have such opportunity in ecotourism in this state. We need to partner with whoever becomes governor on their Department of Ecotourism, Outdoor Recreation, to raise revenue responsibly on the beauty of the land of enchantment.
Democrat Stephanie Garcia Richard and Republican Patrick Lyons, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Kim
Thank
Sorensen is the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Las Cruces. Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred.
And
Always
thank you,
a pleasure.
And thank you at home as well. Make sure to vote. Have a great week.